Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Yesterday I told you how I escaped, by God's grace, being a victim on 9/11. And that was, I told you, of course, about the taxi that did not stop for me for more than half an hour, and how that made me frustrated and upset at the flop of the sightseeing program that I had set for myself to see New York's tourist attractions before attending the UN conference for Department of Public Information at the United Nations premises. So as no taxi stopped for me, and the guys decided to walk, because I had two friends with me, we decided to walk to the UN building. The hotel was in Broadway area, which is famous for theaters, in the 8th Avenue, which is a large street at in Manhattan. And the UN building is in the 1st Avenue. So we would pass through famous districts like the 5th Avenue that contains luxury buildings such as Trump's Tower. So we decided to walk. While we were walking, the events of September 11 took place, and we were unaware of anything happening in the other side of the city, as it was far away. We arrived at the UN building at almost 9 o'clock. That is after the crash of the first plane. And still we didn't feel that something was going on. As we entered the conference hall, we found that the seminar hadn't started yet, and neither had other seminars in other halls start. Then a member of an Indian organization sat between me and my brothers and said, may I tell you something? We said, go ahead. He said, planes hit the World Trade Center. So we checked him out to find that he was an old gray-haired man. So we thought there might be something wrong with his mind or something. And frankly, we didn't pay much attention to what he said. He then said, may I tell you something else? We said, go ahead. He added, and there's a third plane that crashed into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. At that point, when I was certain that there was something wrong with this man, maybe he was delirious from high fever or old age or something. So we remained seated at the conference hall, just waiting for the conference to start. And still, we didn't understand why the conference hadn't started yet. Then I went out exploring what was going on to find people gathering in the UN corridors around screens. So I went to see what they were watching, and I saw the planes hitting the World Trade Center, where I was trying to go an hour ago. But the taxis did not stop for me or my colleagues. So I knew that the Indian man who sat with us in the hall a few minutes ago, when he talked based on this news. But mind you, I still hadn't believed. I was a newcomer to the US. And I'm Saidi, I'm from Upper Egypt, of course. So, which are the laughing stock, actually, of the Egyptian jokes. And Upper Egyptians in New York City will not still believe that no matter what. So I was thinking that what was unfolding before me was not true. I said to myself, some countries or peoples pull off a lie called the April Fool, but maybe not in the beginning of April like we do in Egypt. Maybe there is a September Fool or something. And I didn't know, as a newcomer to America, what is really happening. So all that was fun and pranks, and then President George Bush was on TV saying that the nation was under a terrorist attack. Did I believe that? No, I didn't still. I said, oh, even the president is taking part with the people in this fun fair and in this huge prank. Then they announced the immediate evacuation of the UN building. Everyone had to head to the gates immediately to exit the building. Only at this moment did I believe it was true. Actually, they wouldn't ruin the UN conference for a prank. And the UN building had to be evacuated. Of course, the UN building was a very high-rise building, and we hadn't known how many planes are still hijacked. So they were evacuating all tall buildings, all high-rise buildings. So we exited the building, and at the gate, a security guard slapped herself, telling her co-worker that the second tower had collapsed. I asked her, was there a first tower that had collapsed? I'm still cut off from news and didn't know what was going on. We went out into the street, but that time the streets were different. To some extent, there was a traffic confusion. We walked down to the hotel. We took along with us some of the participants residing in remote hotels. Of course, some were people from Islamic organizations and from the Gulf and had some long beards. So they looked maybe a little bit more than like Bin Laden. So they were obviously Muslims. So it would be dangerous for them to walk for a long distance in this at this time, or even try using means of transportation to far off areas. Some of them actually were residing in New Jersey. That is in another state, close to New York, but it's even a different state. So anyway, we took all those participants with us to our 3 rooms in the Broadway area, which is not far from the UN building. We reached the hotel at about 11 a.m. and we started calling our families to reassure them that we were okay. I tried calling my family who were in Washington, D.C. I could not reach my wife's phone at all, but it was easy to call my mother in Egypt. But local phones in the U.S. were all jammed. I couldn't reach anyone in the U.S. because of the high network traffic, and all Americans are calling each other at that time. So there was an utter confusion. So the only way was to call Egypt. Then Egypt would call my family in Washington, D.C. and tell them and that I'm safe, and also call me back and tell me that they were safe. That was the only way. So we stayed in our hotel rooms, glued to TV screens, watching CNN and news channels to know what was going on outside. Our anxiety was increasing by time. By the late afternoon, we got hungry and we decided to order room service. And instead of going out, of course, in the streets at that time, we called room service, but there was no answer. Obviously, some of the hotel employees had to leave, and services became unavailable in the hotel. What to do now? We wanted to eat. So I suggested going out by myself and buying something for all of us to eat, because they have like long beards and stuff. They look obviously Muslims, but maybe my beard, I was short like that, so maybe I looked a bit Brazilian or Argentinian, Latinos. So I had to go out. I went out into Manhattan's street in New York at about 5 p.m. on September 11, after we all had watched the planes crashing into the towers and the towers collapsing, and people were hurling themselves from the tower top, throwing themselves in the street, and all these painful scenes that we all know very well. I went at 5 p.m. on that day to search for food for the guys. This day I walked around Manhattan streets. I found a Kashmiri Muslim, as I remember, in a restaurant selling halal food. I bought the food and went back to the hotel. But what I saw in such a short span of time on the American streets is unforgettable. the Broadway area where we had been staying, an area of theaters and nightclubs and movie theaters, were all working normally. I went back to the hotel and gave the food to the guys and told them, here is the food, and by the way, everything is okay on the streets. All this suspense you are going through because of sitting in front of news channels all day long is not really what's happening outside. This is what is causing the tense atmosphere for us. People are going about their businesses as usual. They said, that doesn't make sense. It's not even possible. I told them restaurants are opened, theaters and nightclubs are packed as usual. And I heard even loud music thundering inside. They said, fear Allah, what are you talking about? It's total chaos down there. I told them, it is just like I told you. We sat down eating until 7 p.m. and then Rudy Giuliani, the mayor of New York, appeared on TV announcing shutting down all nightclubs, all theaters starting this hour, because it was inappropriate for theaters and nightclubs to be opened at that time. So the guys had not believed me, now they do. Surely airports were also shut down too. I stayed in New York for 3 days till I could take a train to DC without a ticket, because it was impossible to even buy a ticket. The line was more than a mile long in the train station, and I had to get back home to my family in DC who were left alone there. It was total confusion. Many people were traveling back home and airports were shut down, so there was a big pressure on trains and transportation. And I made it to Washington, D.C. Not only did I find the Americans going about their lives as usual, no, they also maintained great relationships with Muslims. And they were offering us unprecedented moral support. I have seen non-Muslim women wearing hijab and coming to the mosques saying, we will escort your Muslim women to the malls and to the supermarkets so that any extremist that might assault a Muslim woman would realize that he might be assaulting one of us, non-Muslims. But within a month, things had changed dramatically. The very same people who were very supportive of Muslims were by then against us. They were turned against us. The very same people who were defending us became our adversaries. The very same people who came to the mosques on September 11 saying, we will protect you, were spitting on the ground when they see us. What had happened? What changed their attitude towards us? No one can say that it is September 11, because immediately after September 11, those people were on our side, not against us. What happened in the first month of September 11 is what changed people's attitude to this extent. This is what we will discuss tomorrow, inshallah. The power of the media. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.